Welcome to Sales Talk for CEOs. I'm glad you're here. I'll be interviewing CEOs who have successfully scaled their B2B sales organization. In each episode, I'll start by uncovering the sales background of each CEO, dig into the strategies they use to build their sales organization, and wrap it up with what the future holds. We'll cover the good, the bad, and the ugly of scaling a sales organization. I'm your host, Alice Hyman. Hi, I'm Alice Hyman, and today I'm launching a podcast specifically for CEOs who want to make a huge impact on sales in their organizations. They may already be doing this, or they may just be starting, but they want to learn from other CEOs who have done it, the good, the bad, and the ugly. And here to help me launch is my good friend and master storyteller, Park Howell.
Hi, Alice. This is just an absolute honor to be on your inaugural show. Thanks for having me. This is so cool. I wished I had found you about 30 years ago when I was building my ad agency. I think it would have been way easier because I knew bupkis about selling myself.
You know, I've heard a lot of CEOs tell me that, Park, that they wish they had met me a long time ago. Because one of the things that I do is, as you know, I help make sales easier. And who doesn't want to make sales easier at their sales organization?
Yeah, absolutely right. And what I like about your positioning in the market, because as you know, I've been in the branding world for 35 years, and that's been my core job, is positioning folks, is the fact that you work specifically with CEOs, asking that tough question. Are sales where you want them to be? They always say no. Next question, of course, is, well, is it your fault? How can I help? And I really love that positioning for what you're doing with this program and what you do with your services.
Yeah, I think that sometimes CEOs, especially if they've never been in sales, really don't feel like sales is their thing, or that they should really be involved very much in sales at their organization, especially the more mature companies that I work with that may be 5, 10, or even 30 years old. But my feeling is that a CEO always has a role in sales, from being the founder and maybe doing all of the selling to a 30-year-old company where they may be ready to exit. They always have a role in sales. It just changes as the organization matures.
Well, that begs the question then, Alice, after all these years, you are launching your own podcast. And it's not about selling to CEOs like many, many shows are out there. It's really about the CEO and how they can get better at helping to direct their revenue organization, and that they have to be at the center of that in one way, shape, or form, and how you help them do that.
Right, exactly. So selling to CEOs is another problem that does need to be covered. However, that is not the one I am covering. It really is about how the CEO can help with the sales strategy, and more importantly, support that sales strategy wholeheartedly so that the sales team, from CRO down, or, if you're a smaller company, you don't have a CRO yet, the director of sales, VP of sales, or even just sales manager, but that team can execute, right, in conjunction with marketing and customer success, because the world is changing, and it's more quickly than ever, right? With COVID and everything that's happened. And so we're seeing the customer change the way they're buying, and we now have to become more adept at engaging that buyer, and that means that we have to look at things a different way. We have to put ourselves out to the world in a different way. And that means that sales, marketing, and customer success have to think together about the journey of the customer and where they intersect with that. And because this is broader than just the sales team, the CEO must be involved, because they've got to set that strategy, set that vision for how we're going to interact with the customer, and then bring all the teams together around that so that they can move forward and really help their customers. And by doing that, of course, they gain more sales.
Well, you have a long, storied career in sales, strategy consulting, and you come from the famous Miller Hyman background. Would you share your backstory with us? I always am fascinated when I host my show, The Business of Story, for the past 6 years, is talking to these leaders like yourself and what got you going and what were the highs and lows that have really informed who you are today and leading up to why you're doing this show.
Yeah, my backstory is a pretty interesting one, considering the fact that I didn't start in sales and I never intended to go into sales. It's pretty interesting. I started as a public school teacher, and I actually taught special education, and I was a reading specialist for about 13 years before I ever went into business. So I really had no intention of being a salesperson or doing really anything related to sales. Little did I know once I got into sales that being a teacher is a lot like being a seller. You are constantly selling your ideas to students and parents, right? To get them to do all kinds of fun things to learn. But I got catapulted into the world of sales because my father, as some of you know, was partners with Bob Miller in Miller Hyman. And he had bought Bob Miller out of the business in the late 80s and was growing the business with his wife, Diane. And they kept inviting me to come work for them full time. Now, I had been doing projects on the side for them for a long time, but they wanted me to work for them full time. And I kept saying, but I'm a teacher. So anyway, eventually I did go work for them, and it was a lot of fun. I learned a ton. I worked with all the curriculum in the Miller Hyman program, strategic selling and conceptual selling. I got to work with some of the largest customers. Of course, I started selling, even though that wasn't why they hired me. Specifically, they hired me more on the curriculum end of things, actually, Park, which was kind of interesting. And then I just naturally started working with our clients and selling. I trained all of the Miller Hyman programs for those years that I worked there. And I also trained the trainers and coached them to make sure they were successful. So all the stuff I learned to do as a teacher really helped coming forward into my sales career with Miller Hyman and getting that launched. But it wasn't long before my dad decided he wanted to sell the company. And so I started my own company, and here we are. I started working with CEOs, and I loved it so much that I've been doing it for over 20 years.
Well, stories are always about those moments and the intersection of moments. So it's not surprising that you come out of the teaching world, but you were also raised in the selling world, and to have those come together. I mean, really a podcast, a good podcast like yours here, is nothing more than a teaching and instructional tool, because people show up to learn, what can I do better? How can I get myself out of this problem? You know, we're not Seinfeld here just entertaining people. You've got to bring the teaching expertise. And so you've got decades of that, and in sales. Take us back to a moment where it was really tough for you, when you maybe you were selling it at Miller Hyman at the time, but you found yourself making a classic sales mistake that you learned from, that we could all learn from.
Well, I have made many, and anybody who's been selling for any period of time has made many, many mistakes. But I've had to fix quite a few problems and with clients, and had some interesting things happen. Like one time when I was working with a company who sold textbooks, a rather large company that everyone would recognize. My dad thought it would be a great idea for me to work with that company because I had a background in education. So I knew about textbooks. I had been on the other side of textbooks adoptions, and so seemed like a good idea. Well, I flew out to this conference for textbooks where all the leaders of this company, including the CEO, were gathering, and just little old me, and I was, in my 30s maybe, and just had started, really selling, and met with all these people I had prepared for days. Thought I had a great conversation with them, didn't talk too much, followed my call plan, did everything just right. And I got back to the office, and my stepmom, Diane, called me into her office, and she said, they don't want to work with you. And I was like, what? They loved me. How's that possible, right? Well, they did want Millerheim, and they did want the program. They just didn't want to work with me. Of course, I was crushed, totally crushed, Park, and couldn't figure out what had happened. But obviously, I did not present myself well to the CEO and a couple of the others, even though they were very nice to me. So I did not close that deal. They gave it to someone else to close.
Alice, do you know
they
what
got
went
the commission
wrong?
too.
Like in hindsight, at that time, did you go back thinking, well, I came out of there believing they loved me, but they didn't? Do you remember what happened in that session that went sideways?
I just think that I was young and naive, and these people were, older than me and a lot wiser. And I was just doing what I had planned to do probably and not really paying attention. Even though I was listening, I probably wasn't really reading the room very well.
Yeah.
So, I really don't know. I did call actually the person who I had the best relationship with and asked her what happened. And she said, just the CEO and some of the other senior people didn't feel like I would really be a good fit for the people I would be training. And she was trying to be nice, of course.
Yeah.
I don't know. They probably just didn't like me. And, I got over it, but I was crushed for months. So, yeah, that's just one small one. But, I've had several accounts that I had to save, a big beverage company, again, that everyone would recognize, a global beverage company where I had some really bad problems that were left over from the previous sales rep, and had to walk into the CEO's office. I had never, hadn't had much experience at that point with CEOs of multi-billion-dollar companies. I was shaking like a leaf, Again, I was all of maybe 33 years old or something like that. And I managed to pull it off, but there were some moments where I was like, oh my God. People talk about imposter syndrome these days.
Yeah.
I didn't even know what that was back then, but I certainly had it. It was like, how can I talk to a CEO? Oh my gosh. Yeah. But I did it, and I was very successful in my career with Miller Hyman. And then, when I left, and it was the .com time, and I started working with CEOs of these startups and helping them start companies from scratch. And it just really went well, even though I had no idea what I was doing. I was just making it up as I went along. But what I learned over those years was how to start a sales team from scratch and how to do it well, right? And then that morphed into me working with more mature companies, which I do now. And, it's just been such a fun ride. And working with CEOs is just such a pleasure, especially those who are really innovative and progressive, and they really want sales at their organization to be great. They really want to serve their customers, and they really want to support everyone who supports the customer.
When I was a CEO, founder of my ad agency, Park & Co., which I ran in Phoenix for 20 years, I was in complete la-la land, believing that our work alone would sell itself and we would get referral and whatever. And it did. We were successful for that first 10 years, and we grew very quickly. We were kind of the new kids on the block, and the work was just coming in. But once it was interesting, Alice, that we got settled as one of the agencies in Phoenix, all of a sudden the competition ramped up. And I didn't ramp up as a sales guy. I thought, well, it's worked the first 10 years, it's going to work the second 10 years. And it was a major mistake on my part. I did hire a sales guy, brought him in. He lasted for about 6 months. Nothing came of that. And I, until I met you, would blame him. Why can't he bring in sales? And then I realized it wasn't him. It was me. I did not have a program for him to follow, or did I understand the program he brought in thinking he was the sales pro and how it was going to work for us, and it didn't work for us. Again, not his fault. But is this something that you see a lot with founders and CEOs of companies of all sizes, that we get so embroiled in the day-to-day operations, we think sales is someone else's job?
Yeah, you are a perfect example, Park. of the CEOs that I work with, it usually is 10 or sometimes even 20 years in where they hit this plateau and they're just not growing. And it is oftentimes, like you said, because whatever they produce sold itself to some degree, right? Enough to really keep the company growing for a while. But it just plateaus at some point, and then how do you get past that? And a lot of it can be because the CEO doesn't understand sales, maybe hired on some salespeople. I had one CEO, the company was, at least 20 years old when I started working with them. They did want to exit, and so they were, wanting to increase their sales to a certain point so that they could get, of course, a better valuation and have a higher exit value. And the CEO said to me, well, I've had 3 VPs of sales in here in 3 years, and they were all terrible, couldn't do their job, And so I said, oh gosh, tell me some more about that. We talked through it. And she looked at me and she goes, oh, it wasn't them. I get it now. It was me. Just like you said, Park, you didn't really have a system in place. You didn't have the vision for sales or the strategy for sales. You expected them to bring that into your company.
Alice, I didn't want to do sales. I wanted to do advertising and marketing and creative work. It'd be so good that people would just naturally be drawn to us, and it just didn't work because what it did is it drew all of the big agency competitors in because we now have their attention and they're like, who's this upstart? We're going to go after their business and knock them off. And so I'm curious too, how many CEOs do you run into that are just like, I don't want to do these sales. I don't want to be a part of it. I just want to sell my thing.
Well, a lot of them, and they shouldn't be selling, especially if their company's 10 years old and they have a sales team, right? Now, at the beginning, CEOs sell because when you're the founder and you start a company, you sell. That's what you do. That's part of it, although they don't want to necessarily. And many CEOs that I work with have 0 sales experience other than selling at their own company when they founded it. So 10 years in, 20 years in, now they've built this sales organization and, some of it's really humming along and working and some of it's not, or they've hit this plateau again. And they don't want to be the one to sell. And at that point, they shouldn't be the one to sell, but they absolutely should be setting the strategy, setting that vision, making sure that the sales, marketing, and customer success are working together in harmony to support that customer and providing the budget that's needed to do a great job and, really providing that support and the encouragement. Like a lot of times the CEOs think, well, what do they need me to say? Oh, good job for? Well, are you kidding me? They're selling for your company. Of course you should say good job when they close a big deal. It's super important and it matters to the salespeople. So I think that the CEO's role, again, changes through the life cycle of the company. But at the point where you're 20 years old and, you've got the company's 20 years old, you've got a plateau and you've got to change things, that can only come from the most senior level in an organization. That can't come from the sales organization or just be the marketing's fault or marketing's problem or it's customer success. No, it's all of you and you all report into the CEO and the CEO needs to make adjustments in that organizational structure and how people work together and the tools and the support mechanisms to make things really work.
In your line of work, Alice, I would imagine in your discovery process, you have to go in and understand probably, a lot of things, but in my mind, 2 major things. Where is the company right now? What plateau, and what is its opportunity for growth? And it sounds like all the customers you work with have this tremendous opportunity for growth. They're not living into it because they don't have their sales strategy together. So that's probably the first thing. Where's the company? But then you probably have to really understand what the mindset is of the CEO and where they are on their own career trajectory as founder, business owner, and marry those 2 together so that you can coach them and provide the strategies that are going to work as quickly as possible for them.
That is absolutely right. So I've got to see where they are and where they want to go. And then I need to understand the CEO's mindset. And from there, I can help them build the strategy that they need and then build the sales organization that they need to support the customers that they want to bring in right? And keep the company growing at the pace they want it to grow. Many of these CEOs have brought in private equity, or they were already private equity backed, but they wanted to maybe launch a new product or change some things. So they either took some debt or equity, and now they have even more pressure on them to perform. But also they may want to exit, especially when you're starting to see companies that are 20 and 30 years old. The owner founder may be ready to exit, pass it down to their kids, sell to another firm, be acquired, or they may be trying to do acquisitions and make themselves bigger. So there's all these different things that CEOs want to do, and sales directly impacts their ability to do all of those things. And as a CEO, Park, what do you really want? You want the freedom. You want the choice. You want to do what you want to do, right? And so in order to do that, sales have to be up. So your valuation is high, and then you have many, many choices.
So let me ask you, how often do you get pushback from CEOs of saying, Alice, that's not my job. That's my chief revenue officer's job. That's my head of sales job. Why are you pestering me with this?
Well, most of the CEOs that I work with have got some idea that it is their responsibility, their role. That's why they've come to me, right? They're like, I know I need to play a role in this. I'm not sure exactly what it is or how to make it happen. But I do hear them saying things like, well, isn't that what marketing's supposed to do? Or isn't that what sales is supposed to do? Yes, it is. But the question is, are you enabling them to do it, right? So if you look at the revenue operations of your company, and again, back to sales, marketing, and customer success, all of those who support the company, and you could even wrap, operations and production into that too, because they're producing the goods and getting them out to the customer or, providing the services. So the whole organization has to work together really well to support the customer. And if you as the CEO don't recognize your role, you do maybe think that it is someone else's responsibility. Now, once you've set that strategy and that vision and you've given everybody what they need, it is their responsibility, and you do need to hold them accountable. That's a big problem I see today, is there are sales teams doing all kinds of things. The CEO doesn't really know what they're doing, and they're not being held accountable. And so they're not hitting the numbers that they're expected to hit. Now, the number may be a whole nother problem because it maybe was pulled out of thin air. And that's, again, because the CEO didn't really know how to set the strategy, and the investors were putting a lot of pressure on them. So we can have realistic numbers that our teams can hit, right? But we do have to have that vision and that strategy in place, and all of these departments working together. And again, that's why when I talk sales, I'm talking to the CEO, because only the CEO can make the kinds of decisions that need to be made, can set the strategy, can have the vision. Only a CEO can do that. A sales leader can't do that. They have to look up to their leadership team to provide that to them. And they cannot, on their own, make the changes that are needed in today's market to really help their company have the growth that is needed. It has to be done at the senior level, and it has to be an effort between all departments.
And Alice, is that why you have really separated yourself from the sales coaches and strategists in the world who primarily work with the chief revenue officers or the head of sales, and you are really specifically about that CEO and founder, because you feel like that's where you're going to have the biggest impact?
100%, because if I work just with a sales leader, which I have done in the past, they start telling me how marketing doesn't do this and customer success doesn't do that, and all the problems that they're having, and the CEO won't let them do this or won't give them a budget for that. So now we're stuck. We're stuck in this place where, okay, well, what can I do about their marketing team or their customer success team? I can do nothing, so I can't fix those problems. I can help them level up their sellers. I can help them with the sales organization that reports to them. I can do some things, but it won't be a significant enough change unless the CEO can support all of those changes that we need and get these teams to work together in concert to really support the customer. So we can only go so far if we don't have the CEO 100% behind us and supporting us in the way that we need them to.
In planning of your show here, I know you've done a whole lot of research on the different podcasts that are available out there in sales, and you found that really no one show speaks directly to the CEO and what they can do. Was that the impetus behind this? Because you've got a lot on your plate already, and you're already very busy. Why did you take on now the onerous, and I know after doing them for 6 years, effort of putting together this marvelous show?
Yeah, there are tons of fabulous sales podcasts out there. I listen to them. A lot of my friends are the hosts. I love them. But they don't speak specifically to the CEO about sales and what they can do to really improve the whole revenue operations of their company. They're not really talking to the leader of the company about the future of sales and the changes that are coming that the CEO is going to need to adjust to. They're addressing a lot of important issues around sales, but not specifically what the CEO should be doing to support sales so they get the growth they need and their company gets the valuation it needs, and then back to
and
having
who
many,
will
many
be
choices.
appearing on your show?
CEOs.
Specifically, CEOs and founders.
So I have CEOs and founders. Most of the guests that are coming are CEOs of more mature companies. Their revenues are usually 10 million plus. A lot of them started their companies, so they were founders, before they were CEOs. And they have built their sales organization to what it is today and have had some challenges and some successes that they're going to share. And we're also going to talk about the future and what they see in the future of what they're going to need to do and how they're going to need to change to keep up the pace that they want for their growth and get their valuation where
with
they'd
every
like it to be.
CEO, they have successes, but we all have tremendous failures. Are you going to be able to pull some of those out of them? Because I found that that's really where the juice is. People want to know where their misstep was, how your listeners, viewers can avoid that, and more importantly, what are the steps that can be taken to either both avoid it and or get yourself out of it as quickly as possible. Are you going to be sharing a lot of your advice on these episodes?
Well, I want CEOs to learn from CEOs, right? So they're going to be sharing a lot of, like I said, the good, the bad, and the ugly, because that's how we learn. And we learn from those failures, and they learned from their failures. So we want to all hear about that, of course. But it will be a lot of fun, I think, talking with these CEOs to also be able to give them a little bit of coaching on what they could have done possibly or what they can do next. And I know that these CEOs will be open to that because they all really want to grow and they really want to support sales of their company.
What are like the top 3 things that you often encounter with a CEO that is standing in their way, that is an obstacle to their success, that we can share right now so any viewer, listener out there can go, yep, I'm 1, 2, or all 3 of those?
Yeah, I think the very first and probably most important thing is the mindset. The CEO's mindset around sales really matters. If they think that it's something they don't want to be involved with, they don't want to do, they don't really like sales, that's a tough one because that bleeds through into everything that they do, right? And it bleeds through to how they feel about sales, their sales team, and what their sales team does. And so I think that mindset is really important. We need to get their mindset around sales to be a positive one and have them be able to communicate that positive mindset. So I think that is something that I see a lot, and we have to work with that. So that's probably the first thing. I think the second thing is that many CEOs don't really know what modern selling is. They don't really know how modern buyers want to buy. And really, it's not their job to know that. That's what their marketing and sales teams should bring to them, the leaders of those teams should bring to them, what is modern selling today and how does it work and how is the customer buying? Many CEOs have an idea of how they did sales, if they ever did sales before they started their company. Maybe that was 20, 30 years ago. Those things that they did then that worked beautifully don't work anymore. So they might be asking their sales team to do the wrong activities, and they might be putting pressure on their sales team to do the wrong types of behaviors because that's what worked when they were selling, or in the early days of their company, these things did work, but they don't work anymore. So we have to help the CEOs understand what modern sellers should be doing and what modern buyers respond to. So it's really about customer engagement. So that's the second thing. Get them to understand what customer engagement looks like today so they can support their team in doing it. And then I'd probably say the third thing is really helping them understand if they have the right people in place, right? So to grow this organization to where you want to grow it, did you hire the right people? Do you have the right people? Have you had some sales leaders with you for 20 years who just can't move the direction you're moving? I have this with a company that sold into hospitals, some very expensive software into hospitals. And the CEO had been in sales in the early days and had been very successful. And they were at a plateau and they really needed to move forward. And he knew that, but he couldn't quite put his finger on what it was. And so after I worked with them for a while, I understood his mindset and it was good. And he did know what needed to happen and what was modern selling. But the two sales leaders that he had in place had been there a long, long time. And even though the CEO had set a vision for the future and set a new strategy, they just couldn't come forward into that. And we did end up having to let one of them go off to a new adventure, very gracefully, always part ways gracefully. And then the other one, we moved into a different position to manage really large accounts. And we brought in a new CRO who really understood what the future of sales was all about. And it made a huge difference. But we just were stuck. I had done all kinds of things to try to make it work. And I came back to that CEO and I said, it's not going to work because these leaders won't allow it. They are stuck in their ways of 20 years ago and they're not going to change. So this is a really hard decision because the CEO had been with these people for a long time and they were friends. He didn't want to let them go, right? But he had to make these changes or his company would have stayed right where it was. So sometimes CEOs have to make really hard decisions. But again, the sales team leader, the whole sales team couldn't have fixed that. It was broken and they weren't fixing it.
It comes down to the
CEO
3 M's of overcoming your sales problems. Fix your mindsets, understand modern selling, and surround yourself with magnificent salespeople. Sorry, I'm in the branding word. It's the 3 M's.
Ooh, you are so good with words, Park. That's absolutely right.
Did you press record?
Recorded this,
yeah,
right? So we better write that down. That is perfect. Yeah, I think we did. Oh my gosh, yeah. This has just been amazing, Park. I so appreciate you getting this story out of me so that everyone can understand what this podcast is going to be about and who it's going to be for. It is for CEOs, but of course, all sales leaders as CROs and CMOs, you should listen to because you can help your CEO. You can help them get to where they need to be. You can help them with their mindset, their
and surrounding yourself with
their modern
magnificent sales professionals.
And magnificent people. So, oh my gosh, that's just perfect. Absolutely, Park. Absolutely. Hey, and I was just noticing there all this time I've been talking to you, it looks like you're in a prison
we've
cell.
all been in the virtual world. This is
for?
virtual, and I kind of sum up like Zoom as to being in a Turkish prison, and we're having a Turkish prison visit here. So I'm tapping on the glass saying, Alice, get me out of here. Get me out. No, actually, the truth is my wife, Michelle, and I moved up to northern Arizona. We have a beautiful home on a lake, but it's rural. And what comes with rural living is horrible internet. You just never know when you're going to get it. So our niece and her husband run this
Yes.
wonderful gym here in Flagstaff called Paragon Athletics, and they train elite runners and distance, the crazy people. Well, they've got this beautiful little storage facility and great Wi-Fi
Oh, cool.
that I'm hanging out with them today talking to you, because I wanted to make sure.
So you're in a storage room today?
In
You're
Flagstaff,
coming to us
Arizona.
live
You know
from
why?
the storage
Because the
room at
show
the gym.
must go on, Alice.
That's right. That is right, Park. And that's what I want CEOs to know. The show must go on. It is your job to make that show happen, and I am going to help you do it. So I am just so thrilled to be launching this podcast. Park, thank you so much. Do you have any last questions for me before we go?
One last question, but I just want to let you know that I've known of you, and we've been friends virtually for several years, but I've had the distinct fortune of working with you last year, first working on your brand story, but then you coaching me on my sales for the business of story. And I've been doing this work for a long time, and I realized I didn't know what I didn't know about selling until I met you. And so I want to thank you for all the contributions and the instruction you've given me to help build out the business of story, and just really appreciate being here with you to launch this fabulous new program. Thank you for that honor.
Oh, my pleasure. It's a pleasure to help your company grow and help you as the CEO. And I am looking forward to all of the great information that the CEOs that I interview are going to share with all of the other CEOs out there. So, Park,
Thanks,
thank
Alice.
you so much. And I know I'll be talking to you soon. Bye. Thanks for tuning in to Sales Talk for CEOs. You can find me at alicehyman.com. Be sure and connect with me on LinkedIn and let me know that you heard the show. If you found value in today's episode, please subscribe, write a review, and share the show with another CEO.